Hey friends, you're watching BrainStormAcres. I'm Henry. Well, if you've been following along for just a little while, you know that we recently acquired a freeze dryer. We've got the medium-sized model. I'll go into why we did that. But we just got some results back. We had one of our freeze-dried meals. This is chicken pot pie. First try of the freeze-dried chicken pot pie. Tastes like chicken pot pie.
Tastes like chicken pot pie to me. Even better, it's warm. It's cold outside right now.
This is a full quart of food. It's enough for 2 people for a really, really satisfying and hearty meal. I made it with carrots, potatoes, chicken, some cream, chicken stock, and some thyme. Well, I also added in something I can't usually add, and that is, first of all, I added in the dairy, and secondly, I added in some roux, flour plus butter, and cooked so it won't have a flour taste. It was stunning. We had it for dinner last night, and it was wonderful. Well, bear with me while I talk a little bit about some nerdy chemistry. Well, it's chemistry, physics. It's how water and ice and water vapor works. I have a chart here that shows the way in which water behaves at different temperatures and pressures. The reason why we're concerned about temperatures is because the higher the temperature, the more nutrients are cooked out of the food. Yeah, we do brown the chicken and we do brown the flour, but we don't go over boiling point when we're making the rest of the dish because it has water and the water turns to vapor. Well, what's the temperature of water vapor at our altitude? Well, at sea level it's 212 degrees. Around here it's about 210 or 211. Now if you look at this chart, you'll see I've set up a section that says ice, a section that says liquid, and a section that says gas. Well, let's talk about how the designers of this Harvest Right freeze dryer exploited this curve, you see these sets of curves, to make the freeze dryer work. Well, first of all, the food gets frozen. Well, that's no big deal, except when you start the freeze drying process, you need to do 2 things. One, you need to reduce the pressure in the freeze dryer. That's done with a vacuum pump. Now, if you look at this curve here again, what you can see is that at lower pressures, that is below 1 atmosphere, that is what we have pressing down on us all the time. Below atmospheric pressure, the boiling point, the vapor point of water reduces in temperature. So what you do to make a freeze dryer actually work is you suck the air out of the vacuum chamber, that's the freeze dryer chamber, with frozen food in it, drop that pressure, and then you start allowing the temperature of the food to increase. Well, what happens then? We go back and look at this chart again, and you can see as the pressure is low and the temperature starts going up, water vapor, that is water gas, will come out of the food. And that's what freeze drying is all about. It's not so much the freezing as it is what's called sublimation. Well, let's talk about sublimation for a minute. When you have frozen snow, frozen water, ice, as the temperature starts coming up, it's possible to have the snow or ice sublimate. But what's happening is the energy from the sun raises the temperature of the snow and ice a little bit, just enough so that it starts to turn to some vapor. Now that's a kind of a tricky thing in nature, but what you do in this freeze dryer is you cheat. You drop the pressure. Primary drying is taking ice in a solid form and immediately transitioning it to a gas phase, that's making it be water vapor, without going through a liquid phase. And that means that you're not going to be turning the food into mush. Our chicken last night was great. It still felt like chicken, tasted like chicken, looked like chicken. Well, it was chicken, which was what we were looking for, and that's what I was hoping for. So you take that ice, turn it to water vapor, and the freeze dryer has the water vapor contact a plate, which cools it down and condenses it. I don't know if the Harvest Right actually freezes it on a cold plate or not. I think it does, because at the very end of the entire process, you have the option of defrosting the freeze dryer. So I'm going to say it goes to a cold plate in the back of the freeze dryer and adheres there as ice. So you take ice from the food and you put ice on the plate. It's a really cool transition. Now for those of you who are really want to go down the rat hole with me, it's a phase change. You go from solid to gas. Now if you watch the Harvest Right in operation, you'll see that eventually the temperature starts coming up. And that's the beginning of the secondary drying phase. The primary drying phase is turning ice into water vapor. The second phase is getting the remainder of the moisture out of the food by raising the temperature. And the temperature in our freeze dryer got to about 125 degrees Fahrenheit, which is a really cool temperature. It's below a lot of normal dehydration systems. So that's good. We're going to go down the rat hole a little bit further on the secondary phase. The first thing that happens is diffusion. That is, we make the water come out of the food out to the surface. And the second one is desorption. That is the reverse of absorbing water into the food is to get the water to come out of the food. Those are the technical terms of what's going on. In practice, you don't need to know that, but I think it's useful to know a little bit about what's going on, because when you understand that, you can understand more about what you can actually do with your freeze dryer. The third phase in the Harvest Right is to bring the food up to a temperature, 125 degrees Fahrenheit, thereabouts, and to run a continuing additional drying cycle. It's just to get more of the moisture out, and that's what I did when I dehydrated this food. Well, let's talk a little bit about freeze-dried food and the cost of it. You know, if you look on many sites, many food sites that sell freeze-dried food products, you'll find that for every 500 or 600 calories of food, you're going to pay between $12 and $20 per 550, 560 calories. You don't get enough calories in one serving for one meal for people who are doing hard work. I chose to freeze dry 32 ounces of chicken pot pie. That's enough for the two of us to have good hearty meals. In the case of eating this freeze-dried food last night, there were a few tablespoons left in the bottom of our bowl that we couldn't eat. It was very satisfying, it was very filling. But that 32-ounce serving of chicken pot pie would have cost us $50. $50. That's one meal's worth for 2 people who are working. That's pretty expensive. Now, in the case of the food that I made, we know what's in it, we know how it's cooked, and now we know how it's preserved. Well, let's talk a little bit about why we chose the medium harvest right freeze dryer and how much energy that freeze dryer took to freeze all of this food. I have 4 32-ounce servings of chicken pot pie. 4 servings. That's $200 worth of freeze-dried food. Now, I'm not going to go spend $200 just for one meal for 2 people. How much energy did this take? Well, the entire process, which extended over 30 hours, was 18 kilowatt hours. That's a fair amount of off-grid energy consumption to do the freeze drying. Well, when we first bought the unit, I told you that I thought that once that vacuum pump started running, the power consumption was going to go really high, and it in fact did, but not as high as I expected over the entire freezing process. Well, let's look at what happened along the way. The first 8 hours of this freeze drying process for our chicken pot pie was to actually get the food down to 0 degrees or thereabouts. 8 hours. During that time, we used about 5 kilowatt hours of energy to bring the temperature down. Well, we ran this process as if we hadn't frozen any food. The next time, I'm going to put it in the deep freeze, which gets down to 0 degrees to begin with, and put that in the freeze dryer because I will save the time and the energy that was used to freeze the food to start with. The next 22 hours was used to actually start processing the freeze drying process. The freeze drying process of the Harvest Right freeze dryer is semi-automated. By semi-automated, what I mean is it tells you when to put the trays in the freeze dryer once the tray supports have gotten to a cold temperature. So you put the trays in at that point. So it will tell you on the screen, hey, put your food in now. You put the food in and it starts a countdown timer. I don't know if they're stopping after the time or if they're measuring the actual vapor pressure. That's the amount of water that's coming out of the food. I'm just not sure. That entire process took about 13 kilowatt hours of energy. Spread out over the entire 30 hours, we used about 500 watts continuously. Now, it varied. Now, why did I choose this particular unit? The medium-size Harvest Right freeze dryer can run on a normal outlet, and it will keep the current draw down under 12 amps or 13 amps. The bigger units will have a higher draw. And why that matters to us is because right now, with our off-grid solar system, we can support this unit easily, and it's just the 2 of us. And based on the experiment that we did to make this freeze-dried food, I think we have the right size unit. We're not trying to make hundreds of pounds of food freeze-dried. Well, let's talk about our solar system and how it supported the freeze dryer and what I did, because we're in the middle of winter. We don't have 12 hours of sun or 14 hours of sun. That's just not going to happen. I used our inverter-based generator to supply power all night long, so that in case the drain on our batteries was too high, the entire process would continue. In a later show, I'll show you why I chose the size generator we're using and some alternatives we have, and why we run the system the way we do. We live off-grid here in the high desert of northern Arizona. We have plenty of sun most of the year. When we don't, it's cheap enough to run a generator for a short period of time. Well, I hope this explains some of why we chose this specific freeze dryer, the results that we had, what we think of it at this point, and what we're planning to do. And what we're planning to do right now is I have 3 more meals of chicken pot pies. That's less than a pound. That's a great weight savings when we're going cross country. And I'll be making some beef stew and other dishes that will be freeze dried in the same fashion. Now, because I know that when we eat the chicken pot pie, both of us will eat it, I've packaged it up as a 32-ounce serving. Going forward, I'm going to make chili. Now, I'm the only one who really likes chili, so I'll freeze dry that in a smaller serving size, just enough for me. I'll be using beef stew in smaller package sizes. What we're going to do is mix and match. If I want to have some chili and Irene wants to have beef stew, we can both have the food that we want. And we don't have to worry about the weight. It's not going to spoil. We could use it anytime we want. Right now, we're putting it into ordinary vacuum sealed bags. They seal down just fine. I can add hot water to the sealed unit and reconstitute that way, or put it into a bowl, put it into a pot. A lot of different ways to do that. But going forward, I'll have alternatives for both of us. The jury's out on whether or not we're going to freeze dry eggs, because Irene only eats the egg whites. I like the both. I'm not sure. That'll be an experiment for the future. Well, thanks for watching. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and ring the bell for notifications, because we're going to be doing a lot more with the freeze dryer. I still have more to show you in our utility building, and Irene's doing a ton down in the shop. She's down making pins and all manner of new things for her business. In 1 month, we go to the next event. Thanks for watching. We'll see you on the next one. Hey, keep brainstorming. We are